Hi, I'm Matthew and welcome to my rock shop. Today I'm going to show you how to turn an agate cube like this into a beautiful marble like this. Okay, so the first step in making a marble out of a cube is marking it with a stencil. And I'm going to make a 3/4 inch marble out of this cube, and I've got a stencil here that's approximately 3/4 inches here. So let's mark this marble. We're going to mark it with just a metal scribe. So I have it marked here with my circle, and I'm going to go over here to the grinder and I'm going to start grinding off the corners. Okay, so my first step is to turn this cube into a cylinder like this. You can see it's round on all the sides. So that means I need to cut off all the corners here. And I mark this with my template so I have something to guide me by. And I'm going to go to my diamond grinder here and start grinding on it. Okay, you can see I'm getting the corners down a little bit, and I'm going to get all those corners down and to start to form my my cylinder. And what I'll have first will be an octagon. I'll show you that when I get that done. Okay, as you can see, I've ground down all the corners and I have basically an octagon shape here. The next step is I'm going to grind off all these little corners here. When I do that, I'll end up with something like a sphere. Not a sphere, but a cylinder. Okay. Okay, I've finished making the cube into a cylinder, and what I've done is I've ground off all the corners, and I've got it pretty circular here. I'm going to check it with my calipers to see how wide it is. It's 0.832, approximately 0.848 or so, and I want to get it down to about 0.780 so that I can get it down to a 3/4 inch or 0.750. It's about the right height, but I need to grind a little bit more around here to get it down to where I want it. So let's go back to the grinder. Now I've taken my cube and I've got the cylinder to the size I wanted to, and I take my calipers and I measure it. And it's about where I want it. It's about 0.7, and it's about 0.7 tall, so it's the same diameter as the height. So the next step is I'm going to cut off all the corners like this. So you can see my cylinder, and I'm going to cut off all these corners here, these two corners on this. So let's get started on that. Okay, that part is done. So what I've done is I've taken and I've cut off those two corners on the end of each one of my cylinders. As you can see, it's starting to look more like a sphere. I've got to cut off a few more corners, and when I get those corners cut off, I'll have a rough sphere that we can start the next step with. So I'm just going to cut off just slightly these corners right here so it starts looking like a sphere. As you can see, just taking a little bit off, you can see that it's already, this half is already looking very spherical. Okay, I'm done with that part. I've cut off all the corners now, and as you can see, it's a pretty nice sphere. It's not perfect, but we're getting to that spherical marble now. So the next step is we're going to take it over here to a rubber wheel, and I have a carborundum block, and I'm going to show you how to take all the lumps and bumps off there so it's a perfect sphere. Okay, so the next step is we're going to cut this rough sphere down so that it's nice and smooth and doesn't have any lumps or bumps in it. And I'm going to do that by using a silicon carbide or a carborundum block that has a little dimple in it. That dimple will fit in there, and then I'm going to spin it on here on this wheel here. Now this is just a rubber wheel that has little bumps in it here. I just used an inner tube and glued it onto here, and I'm going to turn that on. I'm going to spin this around, and the marble will start spinning around in here. Now these carborundum blocks, I want to explain how I made them. This right here is a silicon carbide or carborundum dressing block. It's used for dressing diamond wheels, and you can pick it up in any lapidary equipment supply catalog online. And it's a 2 by 6 inch long. It's about 200 grit, or no, actually it's about 100 grit, and it's silicon carbide, and it's perfect for doing that. If you can't find one of those, you might find a carborundum rubbing brick for masonry, and I've done the same thing, and I've used this before too. It doesn't cut as nice as this one, but it still works pretty well. And for a finishing block, this was a sandstone block that was used for sharpening stones, and I cut it into pieces and put a little dimple in here. And you can use this to finish it off and polish it with. So let's get started on this. Okay, while I'm doing this, because I'm not using a wet wheel, I'm using it dry, it kicks up some dust, and so I'm going to use a dust mask so I'm not getting dust in my lungs. Alright, so I've been working on this marble, and as you can see, it's getting pretty round. Now one of the problems is that when you're grinding on it on the diamond wheel, you make flat spots. And so to get those flat spots out, you have to grind off quite a bit. But a lot of times one of the easy things to do is when you have flat spots that are really hard to see, I go along and I mark them with a marker, and that way as I grind it down, I'll just keep grinding until my marks are gone. So that looks pretty good, and I'm going to go back to my grinding wheel. things that you might want to do as you're making a marble, because you're not grinding with water, it can get warm. So a lot of times I have 4 or 5 marbles I'm working on at the same time. And sometimes I just take a spray bottle and spray some water on it to cool it down, and then I can get started right back up. Okay, I finished up this marble and I've got all the flat spots out, and it's about 7, let's see, the marble is about 0.748, so it's just a little bit smaller than 3/4 inch marbles, and that's perfect. That's what I want to make. So the next step is we're going to go over to here. This is a leather wheel on my grinder, and I'm going to use that to polish it. But I'm not going to sit here and try to polish it by just holding the marble still. I have some more blocks here. That's what I call them anyways. And they're polishing blocks. This is a 200 grit, and what I've done is I've got some polishing pads that I glued inside this little pipe here. So this is 200, I'll start with that first. This is 800, that'll be second. And to finish polishing it, this is a 3000 grit pad inside here. And I just put it up against here again, and it spins the marble in there. So all I need to do is just wet the leather pad a little bit, and that helps give it some traction. And then I put a little bit of water inside my cups here and wet my marble and get started. And I want to put it on the high speed here so it really gets it spinning around. So one of the things I want to do while I'm polishing it is get the marble to polish on every spot. And so I'll start at the top and I'll go through the center, and that will help it change directions. And I'll move my block around here. Sometimes I stop and start it again. And that helps it so that this 200 grit will get all the surfaces of this sphere. I wet it from once in a while, and that helps clean it off. But I work quite a bit more with the 200 grit. And I've noticed that if I have a flat spot, it'll make a little click noise. And in this process is just polishing, and if it has a flat spot, I have to go back and use the rubber wheel and the carborundum blocks. Okay, so the next step is I'm getting my 800 grit and go with that one for a minute or two. And again, I'm trying to get that marble to so every surface is ground. And now I'm going to go to my 3000 grit. Okay, and that's about it. Okay, I finished the marble, and it turned out to be really nice. It has a few little vugs in it, but that doesn't hurt it at all. If you want to get a close of that, you can see that it really has a nice polish on there. It's pretty shiny. And when I measured it with my caliper, it's about 0.747, and it's within 1/1000th of an inch. So this process makes a really good marble, nice and round. So again, I want to just go over the steps one more time as I finish up. I started with a block like this, an agate block, or it could be jasper or some other hard rock. And I used a scribe and to mark it, and then I cut off all the corners so that I had, you got close to that? So I had an octagon, and then I cut off the corners so I had a cylinder like this. Then I cut off the corners of the cylinder so I had a shape something like that. And then I cut off the corners there again, and then I had a rough sphere. And then using a block, this is a carborundum block with a dimple in it, and setting that in there and putting it up against the rubber wheel, I was able to spin it around and get all the lumps and bumps out. And then using a polishing block and the leather wheel, I just turned that in there until using 3 different ones, 200, 800, and 3000, to get it all polished, and that's it. And let me show you some of the marbles that I've made. So this one right here that we made today was made out of a piece of South Dakota prairie agate, and it has orange and blue and white and red, and it turned out to be a really interesting marble. If you can get a close-up of these, I'll show you some of the other marbles that I've made. This is a piece of lanite, a South Dakota prairie agate, some Brazilian agate that's got some really nice banding in it and other colors. This is a Indian fortification agate. It's basically gray with some white bands, and it turned out really neat. Here's another one. This is an Indian fortification agate. This is a black skin agate with lots of nice banding in it. Another Brazilian agate. This one has some nice chevrons in it. This is just a piece of quartzite that had some bands in it, and it turned out really nice too. This is a piece of Kentucky flint. So, anyways, thanks for watching my video on how to make a marble out of a piece of agate.